It feels like you've known them before, but not in a way you can trace back to a specific memory. There's no clear moment, no past encounter you can point to, and yet the feeling lingers with quiet certainty. From the very beginning, something about them bypasses the usual process of getting to know someone. There's no awkwardness that needs to dissolve over time, no gradual warming up. Instead, there's an immediate sense of ease, as if the space between you was already familiar long before you ever spoke. You notice it in the smallest details, the way conversations flow without effort, as if you're continuing something that was never interrupted. Silences don't feel heavy or uncomfortable. They feel natural, almost necessary, like both of you understand something that doesn't need to be said out loud. Even their presence alone carries a strange comfort, not because they've earned your trust over time, but because something inside you decided to trust them instantly. It's confusing because your mind tries to make sense of it. It searches for logical explanations, shared experiences, similar backgrounds, common interests, but none of those things fully explain the depth of what you feel. You've met people before who had things in common with you, people who were easy to talk to, yet this is different. This feels deeper, quieter, and more profound, like it exists beneath the surface of everything you can see. There's also a sense of recognition that goes beyond physical appearance or personality. It's as if you recognize their energy, their way of being, the essence of who they are. You might catch yourself staring at them for no reason, not because you're trying to figure them out, but because something about them feels strangely known. It's not curiosity, it's familiarity without evidence. And then there are moments that intensify this feeling, a shared glance that seems to hold more meaning than it should, a laugh that feels synchronized, like you're both tuned into the same invisible frequency. Even disagreements don't feel like threats. They feel like something you've already navigated before, as if the connection itself is stronger than any temporary conflict. What makes it even more unusual is how quickly this familiarity develops. It doesn't follow the normal timeline of relationships. There's no slow build, no cautious progression. Instead, it's as if you skipped steps without realizing it, arriving at a depth that usually takes months or years to reach. And that can be unsettling because it challenges everything you thought you understood about connection and trust. Part of you questions it, wonders if it's too fast, too intense, too good to be real. But another part of you, quieter yet more certain, doesn't question it at all. That part simply feels without needing proof or validation. It doesn't ask where this familiarity comes from, because to it, the feeling itself is enough. And even when you try to distance yourself from it, to step back and regain a sense of control, the feeling doesn't disappear. It lingers in the background, subtle but persistent, like a quiet reminder that some connections don't need to be explained to be real, that some people enter your life not as strangers, but as something your soul already understands without needing permission from your mind. They don't just make you feel good, they make you feel everything. In the beginning, you might expect warmth, ease, and comfort, but instead, something far more complex begins to unfold. Their words linger longer than they should. Their actions affect you more deeply than you're used to. And suddenly, emotions you thought you had under control start rising to the surface without warning. It catches you off guard. A simple comment from them can stay in your mind for hours. A small misunderstanding can feel heavier than it logically should. You may even find yourself reacting in ways that don't fully make sense to you, as if something deeper is being stirred beneath your awareness. It's not just about what they say or do, it's about what their presence unlocks inside you. They seem to touch parts of you that others never reached. Old insecurities you thought you had outgrown begin to reappear. Doubts you buried long ago start to find their way back into your thoughts. It's uncomfortable, sometimes even overwhelming, because you're not just dealing with the present moment, you're facing echoes of your past at the same time. You might question why this is happening. Why them? Why now? Out of all the people you've met, why does this one person have the power to affect you so deeply? It doesn't feel random. It feels specific, almost intentional, like they are somehow connected to parts of you that were waiting to be seen. At times it may even feel frustrating. You might wish things were simpler, easier, more predictable. You might wonder why being around them brings both clarity and confusion at the same time. One moment you feel understood in a way you've never experienced before, and the next you feel exposed, as if nothing about you can be hidden. But beneath that discomfort, there's something undeniable. Their presence forces honesty, not just with them, but with yourself. You start noticing patterns in your behavior, emotional reactions you've repeated without realizing it, fears that have quietly shaped your decisions. It's as if they hold up a mirror, and for the first time, you're seeing yourself without distortion. This kind of connection doesn't allow you to stay the same. It challenges the version of you that was built on avoidance, on pretending, on staying within safe emotional boundaries. Around them, those boundaries begin to break, not because they're forcing you to change, but because their presence makes it impossible to remain unaware. And even when it feels intense, there's a strange sense of meaning behind it. It doesn't feel like chaos without purpose. It feels like something is being revealed layer by layer, emotion by emotion. You begin to understand that the reactions you're having are not just about them. They're about you, about what has been waiting beneath the surface all along. You may try to resist it at first, to push those feelings aside or create distance to regain control. But even then, the impact remains. The awareness doesn't fade. The emotions don't simply disappear. Instead, they stay with you, quietly reshaping the way you see yourself, the way you understand your past, and the way you approach your own emotional world. You try to make sense of it, but nothing fits into a clear explanation. There's no checklist they perfectly match, no logical reason that fully justifies the intensity of what you feel. On paper, it might not even look ideal. The timing could be wrong, the circumstances complicated, or the differences between you too obvious to ignore. And yet, despite all of that, something continues to pull you toward them in a way you can't easily resist. It's not a decision you consciously make. It doesn't feel like a choice at all. The feeling exists before you even have time to analyze it, before your mind can step in and question whether it makes sense. You might tell yourself to slow down, to stay grounded, to keep things rational, but that quiet pull remains steady, almost like an undercurrent guiding you without asking for permission. You notice how your attention naturally shifts toward them, even when you try to focus on something else. In a room full of people, your awareness finds them without effort. When something happens in your life, good or bad, They're the first person who comes to mind. It's not something you plan or control. It simply happens as if your thoughts are instinctively drawn in their direction. What makes it even more confusing is how this connection doesn't rely on constant interaction. Even in their absence, the feeling doesn't weaken. You can go hours, days, or even longer without speaking and still feel that quiet presence in the background of your mind. It's subtle, but persistent, like a thread that remains unbroken regardless of distance or time. You may question yourself more than once. You might wonder if you're imagining it, if you're projecting meaning onto something that isn't really there. Logic tries to intervene, offering reasons why this shouldn't feel the way it does. It points out the uncertainties, the risks, the lack of clear explanation. But no matter how convincing those thoughts seem, they don't erase the feeling. They only exist alongside it. There's also a sense that this pull is different from simple attraction or curiosity. It goes beyond surface level interest. It feels deeper, quieter, and more rooted, as if it originates from a place within you that doesn't rely on external validation. You're not drawn to them because you're trying to fill a void or prove something to yourself. The connection exists on its own, independent of what you can explain or justify. Sometimes it can feel unsettling to not have a clear reason. Human nature seeks understanding, structure, and predictability, and this kind of connection challenges all of that. It asks you to sit with uncertainty, to feel something without immediately defining it. That lack of control can create tension between what you feel and what you think you should feel. And still, the pull doesn't demand urgency or force. It doesn't rush you or pressure you into action. It simply exists steady and present, quietly influencing the way you see them and the way you respond to their presence. It's not loud or overwhelming, but it's undeniable in its consistency, like something that continues to exist, whether you acknowledge it or not. Being around them creates a quiet shift inside you, one that doesn't feel forced or demanded. They don't ask you to change, don't criticize who you are, and don't set conditions for their presence in your life. Yet somehow, without saying much at all, they awaken a desire within you to become more than you've been. It's not about impressing them or earning their approval. It feels more personal than that, almost like something inside you is responding to their presence by rising to a higher version of itself. You begin to notice small changes in your behavior. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you approach your goals. You find yourself wanting to be more disciplined, more honest, more aligned with the person you always believed you could be. It's not a sudden transformation, but a gradual unfolding, as if parts of you that were dormant are slowly coming to life. What's different about this feeling is that it doesn't come from pressure or insecurity. In the past, the urge to improve might have been driven by fear, fear of not being enough, fear of losing someone, or fear of being judged. But this feels different. There's no fear attached to it. Instead, there's a sense of inspiration, a quiet motivation that feels natural and steady rather than urgent or overwhelming. Their presence seems to reflect something back to you, not in a way that highlights your flaws, but in a way that reminds you of your potential. You start to see yourself more clearly, not just as you are, but as you could be. It's as if they hold a version of you in their perception that you're only beginning to recognize within yourself. You might find yourself reevaluating your habits, your choices, and even your priorities. Things that once felt acceptable may no longer feel aligned with who you're becoming. You begin to let go of patterns that no longer serve you, not because someone told you to, but because they no longer resonate with the person you're growing into. This process isn't always easy, but it feels meaningful, like every small step is part of something larger. There's also a sense of accountability that naturally develops, not because they expect perfection, but because their presence makes you more aware of yourself. You become more conscious of your actions, your words, and the energy you bring into your interactions. You start holding yourself to a higher standard, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to align with the best version of who you are. At times, this growth can feel challenging. It requires honesty, effort, and a willingness to step outside of what feels comfortable. But even in those moments, there's a sense that the change is worth it, that it's leading you somewhere meaningful, rather than taking something away from you. What stands out the most is that this desire to become better doesn't fade when they're not around. It stays with you, quietly influencing your decisions and shaping your mindset. It becomes less about them over time and more about you, about the relationship you have with yourself and the standards you choose to live by. Being with them feels like stepping into two completely different emotional worlds at the same time. On one hand, there is a deep sense of calm that settles within you, something steady and grounding that makes you feel safe without needing a reason. It's in the way their presence quiets your mind, how simply being near them can ease a tension you didn't even realize you were carrying. There's a softness to it, a stillness that feels almost unfamiliar because of how natural it is. But at the same time, there is something else moving beneath that calm, something unpredictable, intense, and difficult to fully understand. Alongside the peace, there is a kind of emotional chaos that doesn't follow any clear pattern. Feelings rise and fall quickly, sometimes without warning. One moment you feel completely at ease, and the next you're overwhelmed by thoughts, questions, or emotions that seem to come from nowhere. This contrast can be confusing. You might wonder how one person can make you feel so grounded and so unsettled at the same time. It challenges your usual understanding of what connection is supposed to feel like. You may have believed that the right person would only bring calm, stability, and clarity, yet here you are experiencing something far more complex. The peace comes from a sense of being understood without needing to explain yourself. It's in the quiet moments, the shared glances, the unspoken connection that makes everything feel simple and real. You don't feel the need to perform or prove anything. You can just exist, and that in itself feels enough. That kind of peace is rare, and when you feel it, you recognize its depth even if you can't fully explain it. The chaos, on the other hand, comes from everything that this connection stirs within you. It brings your emotions closer to the surface, making them harder to ignore. Old fears, hidden insecurities, and unresolved thoughts begin to appear more clearly. It's not that they are creating these feelings, but their presence seems to reveal what was already there, waiting to be noticed. There are moments when this emotional intensity can feel overwhelming. You might question your reactions, wondering why you feel things so strongly, why everything seems heightened in their presence. It can feel like you're losing a sense of control, as if your usual ways of managing your emotions are no longer enough to keep everything balanced. And yet, despite the chaos, you don't feel the need to walk away. There is something within the connection that keeps you anchored. Even when things feel uncertain, the peace acts as a kind of foundation, something steady beneath the surface that reminds you there is meaning in what you're experiencing, even if you don't fully understand it. This coexistence of calm and intensity creates a unique emotional space, one where you are both comforted and challenged at the same time. It's not simple, and it's not always easy, but it feels real in a way that is difficult to ignore, or around them, something shifts in a way you don't immediately understand. The version of yourself that you present to the world, the one shaped by habits, expectations, and careful control, doesn't seem to function the same way anymore. It's not that you consciously decide to drop the act. It's that maintaining it suddenly feels unnatural, almost impossible. The usual filters you rely on begin to fade without effort. You might notice it in the way you speak. Words come out more honestly, without the usual calculation or hesitation. You don't overthink how you sound or how you're being perceived. There's less editing, less adjusting, and more truth in what you say. Even things you would normally keep to yourself start to surface, not because you plan to share them, but because holding them back feels unnecessary. It's not just about what you say, it's about how you exist in their presence. Your body language, your expressions, your reactions all feel more natural, less controlled. You're not trying to impress them or fit into a certain image. The need to appear perfect or put together begins to lose its importance. Instead, there's a quiet acceptance of being seen exactly as you are in that moment. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Being real in such an unfiltered way can bring a sense of vulnerability that you're not used to. You may become aware of parts of yourself that you usually keep hidden, your doubts, your flaws, your insecurities. Without the usual layers of protection, those parts feel more exposed, more visible, and that can create a sense of unease. But alongside that discomfort, there is also a subtle sense of relief. There's no pressure to maintain an image or keep up a performance. You don't feel the need to constantly manage how you're coming across. That freedom, even if it feels unfamiliar at first, carries a kind of quiet ease. It allows you to simply be, without the weight of expectation. What's interesting is that this authenticity doesn't feel forced by them. They're not demanding honesty or asking you to open up in any direct way. It's something about their presence, the way they interact, the way they see you, that creates an environment where being fake feels out of place. It's as if the connection itself doesn't have room for anything artificial. You may also notice that they seem to see through you in a way others don't. Not in an intrusive or uncomfortable sense, but in a way that makes it hard to hide behind surface level expressions. They pick up on subtle changes in your mood, the things you don't say, the emotions you try to mask. This kind of awareness can feel intense because it removes the usual distance you're able to maintain with others. Over time, this experience begins to change how you see yourself. You start to recognize how much of your identity was shaped by the need to be accepted, understood, or approved of by others. And in contrast, this connection shows you what it feels like to exist without those conditions, where your value isn't tied to how well you can present yourself. There's a rawness to this kind of connection, a level of honesty that doesn't rely on effort. It doesn't ask you to become someone else or meet a certain standard. Instead, it brings you closer to who you already are beneath everything you've learned to show the world. Something about the connection stays with you in a way that doesn't fade with time or distance. Even after moments pass, conversations end, or circumstances shift, there is a quiet imprint left behind, something that continues to exist beneath the surface of your daily life. It's not loud or obvious, but it's constant, like a subtle change in the way you see the world and yourself within it. You begin to notice that your thoughts are different. The way you reflect on experiences, the way you interpret emotions, even the way you understand your past starts to shift. It's as if this connection opened a door inside you that can't be closed again. Once you've seen yourself through that lens, you can't fully return to who you were before. Memories tied to them carry a different weight. It's not just about what happened between you, but how those moments felt, how deeply they reached into parts of you that had never been touched before. Even the smallest interactions seem to hold significance, not because of what was said or done, but because of what they awakened within you. There's also a sense that this change is not something you chose consciously. It happened naturally, without effort or intention, simply through the experience of knowing them. You didn't plan to be affected this deeply, and yet here you are, noticing that something fundamental has shifted in the way you think, feel, and respond to life. You may find yourself revisiting parts of your past with a new level of awareness. Things that once seemed clear now appear more complex. Patterns you never questioned before begin to stand out. It's as if the connection brought a new level of clarity, one that allows you to see beyond the surface of your own experiences. At times, this awareness can feel overwhelming. Change, especially the kind that reaches deep into your sense of self, is not always comfortable. There may be moments when you long for the simplicity of who you were before, when things felt more predictable and less intense. But even in those moments, there's an understanding that you can't unknow what you now know. The impact of this connection extends beyond emotions. It begins to influence your choices, your boundaries, and the way you approach relationships moving forward. You become more aware of what feels genuine and what doesn't. You start to recognize the difference between surface level interactions and something deeper, something more meaningful. What stands out the most is that this change doesn't depend on the outcome of the connection itself. Whether the person remains in your life or not, the effect they've had on you continues. The growth, the awareness, the shift in perspective, those things become a part of you. They don't disappear just because circumstances change. There's a quiet transformation that takes place, one that doesn't need to be announced or explained. It shows itself in the way you carry yourself, the way you understand others, and the way you relate to your own inner world. It's subtle but undeniable, like something within you has been rearranged in a way that can't be undone.